Welcome to the new video of Neurophilos. Get ready to dive into a gripping tale that will leave you breathless, thinking, and inspired. Whether you're here for the mystery, the drama, or the unexpected twists, you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe so you never miss another powerful story. Let's begin. When life feels empty for no clear reason, have you ever caught yourself feeling strangely indifferent, even when nothing seems wrong? Your life is functioning. You wake up, go to work, talk to people, fulfill responsibilities. On paper, things look fine. And yet, beneath all of that, there's a quiet heaviness, a flatness, a sadness that doesn't have a clear cause. This feeling is easy to dismiss. Many people do. They call it weakness, burnout, or a lack of gratitude. Some assume it must be depression, even when it doesn't fully fit. Others feel guilty for experiencing it at all. Why should I feel empty when my life is stable? But what if this state isn't a personal failure? What if it isn't coming from inside you at all? What if the environment you live in is slowly draining your emotional life? Modern society presents itself as a success story. Cities are efficient. Technology connects us instantly. Systems are optimized to save time, increase output, and remove friction. From the outside, it looks like progress. But in this process, something subtle and essential has been sacrificed. Something that doesn't show up in productivity reports or economic graphs. Beauty, not beauty as luxury or decoration, but beauty as a psychological necessity. The kind that soothes the nervous system. The kind that reminds the mind it belongs somewhere. The kind that gives shape and meaning to experience. Philosopher Alain de Botton argues that we are living through a state of chronic aesthetic hunger. Our surroundings no longer nourish us emotionally. In fact, many of them do the opposite. They are not just plain or uninspiring, they are actively hostile to human sensitivity. Think about the spaces most people spend their days in. Gray offices, narrow corridors, artificial lighting that never changes, buildings made of glass, steel, and concrete, designed to be efficient but not expressive. Neighborhoods with no trees, no visual history, no sense of story. Repeated shapes, repeated colors, repeated silence. This ugliness is not neutral. It communicates something constantly, even if you're not consciously aware of it. It says, nothing here matters. No memory, no imagination, no emotion is required. Just function, just movement, just compliance. Over time, this message seeps into the psyche. The mind adapts by dulling itself. Emotional sensitivity becomes a liability in places that offer nothing back. So people become numb, not dramatically unhappy, just flat, disconnected, quietly tired. And the most unsettling part is that this condition often goes unnoticed. Ugliness has become normal. We've been taught that caring about aesthetics is shallow, that beauty is a luxury, that design is vanity. Efficiency, we're told, is what really matters. But the truth is simpler and more uncomfortable. When beauty disappears, something inside us gets injured. That injury doesn't always look like sadness. Sometimes it shows up as apathy, sometimes as anxiety, sometimes as a sense that life is happening at a distance, like you're watching rather than living. You keep moving, but the color drains out of experience. This isn't about being picky or overly sensitive. It's a natural response to environments that were never designed with the human soul in mind. When spaces stop acknowledging emotion, history, and meaning, the people inside them begin to feel invisible. So when you feel empty without knowing why, when motivation fades for no clear reason, when joy feels distant even though life is fine, it may not be your mind that's broken. It may be the place your mind is being forced to live. The nervous system was not designed for this world. For millions of years, the human brain developed in close conversation with the natural world. Long before cities, offices, and screens, the nervous system learned how to regulate itself through sunlight, shadow, movement, texture, and sound. Trees swaying in the wind, water flowing over stone, the gradual shift of light across the day. These were not background details. They were the conditions under which the mind learned what safety, rhythm, and balance felt like. Nature did more than provide shelter. It stimulated curiosity, calmed anxiety, and gently guided attention. Variation was constant, but never overwhelming. The nervous system could rest without becoming bored and stay alert without becoming exhausted. This balance shaped emotional resilience. Today, that dialogue has been largely severed. Most people now spend their lives inside sealed environments. Concrete walls, glass towers, artificial lighting that never changes, climate-controlled air, repetitive textures, and identical layouts. These spaces may be efficient, but they are biologically unfamiliar. The brain did not evolve for this kind of sensory input, or rather this lack of it. What emerges is a quiet form of deprivation. The nervous system depends on certain signals to function well. Natural light, for example, regulates the circadian rhythm, which influences sleep, mood, focus, and emotional stability. Subtle changes in brightness and color tell the brain when to slow down and when to engage. When those signals disappear, replaced by constant white or fluorescent light, the body may keep moving, but internal rhythms begin to drift. This is why people often feel tired without being physically exhausted, why sleep becomes shallow, why motivation fades even when there is nothing obviously wrong. Philosopher Alain de Botton suggests that by removing beauty from our environments, we are quietly attacking a fundamental psychological need. In The Architecture of Happiness, he writes that we are, for better or worse, different people in different places. The space around us doesn't just reflect who we are, it shapes who we become. Living in lifeless environments gradually alters emotional tone, not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly. Sensitivity dulls, curiosity weakens. Everything begins to feel slightly heavier. This happens because the brain interprets monotony as a signal of threat, not an immediate danger, but a persistent one. When an environment offers no positive stimuli, no warmth, no organic variation, the nervous system stays on low-level alert. It's a state of background tension. You may not consciously feel anxious, but your body is never fully at rest. Over time, this constant readiness turns into irritability, fatigue, and emotional withdrawal. Beauty, contrary to what many believe, is not an extra. It's a regulator. Seeing natural forms, meaningful patterns, or carefully crafted spaces triggers real physiological responses. Stress hormones decrease, attention softens. The mind enters a state where reflection becomes possible. These moments aren't indulgent, they are stabilizing. Without them, inner life becomes impoverished. People begin to feel like mechanical units inside systems that demand productivity but offer no restoration. Thought becomes purely functional. Emotion becomes something to manage or suppress. There is another consequence that often goes unnoticed. Aesthetic deprivation weakens imagination. Repetitive, sterile environments keep the mind locked in operational mode, focused only on what needs to be done next. There is little space to wander, to reflect, to dream, and the longer someone lives in these conditions, the more normal they feel. Ugliness becomes familiar. Apathy becomes routine. Eventually, people stop asking whether their environment supports them at all, not because they are weak, but because their nervous system has been quietly adapting to survive in a world it was never designed for. Productivity spaces in the slow erosion of the inner life. The sterile environments that dominate modern life did not appear by chance. They were designed with intention. Offices, schools, hospitals, and government buildings were shaped around a single priority: efficiency. Every element was measured by how well it reduced friction, controlled behavior, and kept people focused on tasks. Straight lines replaced curves, neutral colors replaced warmth. Windows were minimized, lighting was standardized. Furniture became modular, interchangeable, and impersonal. Anything that might invite reflection, emotion, or pause was labeled a distraction. On the surface, this approach seems practical. A space free of unnecessary elements should help people concentrate. And for a short time, it often does. Productivity can increase. Tasks get completed. The system appears to work. But beneath that surface, something quietly begins to deteriorate. When a person spends long periods in environments that acknowledge only function, the mind adapts by becoming functional as well. Thought narrows. Emotion is subdued. Creativity becomes inefficient and therefore unwelcome. Over time, people stop feeling present in their own lives. They operate, but they no longer inhabit what they are doing. Philosopher Alain de Botton observed that one of the great mistakes of modern architecture was abandoning the idea that spaces should reflect who we are and who we hope to become. Instead, environments began to reflect only what organizations wanted from us: output, compliance, consistency. This shift has consequences. When you live or work in a place that communicates nothing about values, history, or meaning, your internal world starts to mirror that emptiness. You may still think, plan, and execute, but the deeper layers of identity slowly disengage. Corporate environments illustrate this clearly. Many offices are designed to erase individuality in the name of neutrality. Personal photos are discouraged. Color is considered unprofessional. Art is avoided unless it is abstract enough to mean nothing. Spiritual or cultural symbols are removed to prevent discomfort. What is presented as neutrality is actually uniformity. And uniformity teaches a quiet lesson. Your inner world is irrelevant here. The longer someone exists in this kind of space, the more they internalize that message. They learn to compress themselves, to speak less, to feel less, to become smaller in ways that are difficult to articulate but deeply felt. This erosion doesn't always show up as sadness. Often it appears as exhaustion without cause, a sense of being replaceable, a feeling that life has become colorless, mechanical, and strangely distant. People begin to describe their days as repetitive, empty, or meaningless, even when they are objectively busy. And this logic doesn't stop at the office door. It has crept into homes as well. Minimalism, once intended as a tool for clarity, has in many cases turned into emotional sterility. White walls, gray furniture, identical layouts, mass-produced objects with no history. Living spaces increasingly resemble showrooms or workspaces rather than sanctuaries. But a home is not meant to optimize performance. It is meant to restore. When living spaces echo the same cold efficiency as workplaces, the psyche loses its refuge. There is nowhere to soften, nowhere to return to oneself. Over time, people begin to believe that their stories, memories, and emotions do not deserve space. They adapt to environments that reflect nothing personal and assume that this emptiness is normal. It isn't. Human beings need spaces that acknowledge their inner life, places that allow emotion, imagination, and imperfection. When environments deny these needs, the result is not strength or discipline, it is quiet depletion. This is why so many people feel burned out without knowing why. Why motivation disappears even when ambition remains. Why life feels busy but hollow. The spaces we inhabit are shaping us continuously, and when they are designed only to extract productivity, they slowly erode the very qualities that make life feel worth living. Digital overload and the architecture of dissociation. As physical environments have grown quieter, flatter, and more lifeless, another space has expanded to fill the void: the digital world. If offices, homes, and cities have been emptied of sensory richness, screens have done the opposite. They flood the mind with constant stimulation, and it is this contrast, sensory absence in the physical world paired with sensory excess in the virtual, that is quietly exhausting the modern psyche. During the day, many people move through spaces that offer almost nothing emotionally. Cold corridors, colorless rooms, identical buildings. There is little to look at, little to feel, little to respond to. Then, in moments of rest, the nervous system is thrust into a torrent of notifications, messages, short videos, headlines, and alerts. Attention is pulled in dozens of directions at once. This combination is not balance. It is overload layered on top of deprivation. Digital stimulation does not nourish the mind in the way a natural landscape or a meaningful physical space does. It fragments attention instead of settling it. Rather than inviting reflection, it demands reaction. The brain jumps rapidly from stimulus to stimulus, never given enough time to integrate what it sees or feels. Over time, this pattern reshapes cognition. The ability to stay with one thought weakens. Patience erodes. Silence becomes uncomfortable. Many people feel restless even when nothing is happening, compelled to reach for their phones the moment attention is no longer externally occupied. This is not accidental. Digital platforms are designed to capture and hold attention by triggering compulsion. The nervous system remains in a constant state of alert, scanning for the next update, the next reward, the next interruption. Stress becomes background noise rather than a clear signal. And because this stress is constant but low level, it often goes unnoticed. People don't feel panicked. They feel scattered, mentally tired, unable to focus deeply, emotionally flat. Philosopher Alain de Botton suggests that well-designed physical spaces can help reconnect us with ourselves. They offer rhythm, containment, and meaning. They allow the mind to slow down and reorganize. But most modern life no longer happens in these spaces. It happens on screens. The problem is not technology itself, but substitution. Digital stimulation has replaced the experiences that once grounded the nervous system. Presence, contemplation, sensory depth. The pleasure of the feed is immediate and effortless, while the pleasure of real beauty requires time, attention, and stillness. Gradually, the brain adapts to what is easiest. Quick rewards begin to dominate. Deeper forms of satisfaction feel distant or inaccessible. The capacity for contemplation, the ability to sit with beauty, meaning, or silence, weakens. And without contemplation, beauty becomes difficult to perceive at all. This creates a painful paradox. The physical world makes us ill through absence. The digital world makes us ill through excess. One starves the senses, the other overwhelms them. Caught between these two extremes, many people lose the ability to recognize what is happening to them. To make matters worse, architecture has begun to mirror digital logic. Buildings increasingly resemble interfaces, smooth surfaces, reflective materials, impersonal lines, no symbols, no warmth, no invitation to pause. Spaces become containers for movement rather than places for experience. When both the physical and virtual environments treat human beings as data points, units of attention, productivity, or flow, the result is dissociation. People feel present everywhere and nowhere at the same time, busy but disconnected, stimulated but empty. This is not simply fatigue or lack of focus. It is a form of psychological collapse induced by environments that were never designed to support the complexity of human consciousness. And beneath all of this lies something even deeper. The quiet message these spaces send, that you are interchangeable, that you exist to respond, to produce, to consume, that nothing about you needs to be remembered. To understand how this message is embedded, not just in screens, but in the very structure of our cities and buildings, we need to look more closely at modern architecture itself. Because when space stops speaking to the human soul, it doesn't become neutral, it becomes dehumanizing, reclaiming beauty as an act of psychological survival. When faced with the realization that our environments are quietly shaping our inner lives, one unavoidable question emerges. What can be done? If cities, offices, and even homes have become emotionally sterile, how does a person protect their mind without escaping society altogether? The answer is not grand rebellion or perfect architecture. It is something quieter, more deliberate, and far more powerful. It begins with reclaiming beauty, not as decoration, not as luxury, but as a necessity for psychological survival. Modern culture often treats concern for aesthetics as superficial. We are told that function matters, that efficiency is mature, that caring about atmosphere is indulgent. But this belief is not neutral. It trains people to ignore their own emotional needs. In reality, paying attention to the spaces we inhabit is a way of listening to the nervous system when it signals distress. Every environment speaks. Even when it says nothing explicitly, it communicates through light, texture, color, proportion, and rhythm. When you begin to consciously choose what surrounds you, you are making a quiet statement. My inner life matters. Reintroducing beauty does not require wealth or large spaces. It begins with intention. A living plant in a room dominated by concrete. Natural light allowed to enter where possible. A color that evokes warmth instead of neutrality. Materials that feel organic rather than synthetic. Objects with personal history instead of generic replacements. These are not small things. They are signals to the mind that it is safe to soften. A home, as Alain de Botton reminds us, is not simply a place to sleep. It is a place that helps us remember who we are. When a space reflects nothing personal, it offers no memory, no meaning. Over time, the person living there begins to feel the same way. Unmarked, interchangeable, unnoticed. This is why creating even a single refuge matters. A corner where the light falls gently in the morning. A shelf with books that shaped your thinking. A photograph that holds memory. A chair placed not for efficiency, but for presence. These small choices become anchors in a world that constantly pulls attention outward. If you cannot change the whole environment, you can still claim fragments of it. A desk, a window, a wall, a ritual. These micro-sanctuaries act as quiet resistance against a culture that treats people as units of function. It is also essential to understand this. Feeling affected by ugly or dehumanizing environments is not weakness. It is awareness. When a space drains you, when an office depresses you, when a neighborhood feels cold and indifferent, your response is not exaggerated. It is human. Recognizing this truth is already a step toward healing. It reframes emptiness not as a personal defect, but as a signal that something external needs attention. Reclaiming beauty, then, becomes a radical act, not loud, not dramatic, but deeply subversive. It challenges a system that prioritizes output over well-being. It quietly insists that life is more than productivity, that humans need meaning, atmosphere, and care to remain fully alive. Caring for your environment is caring for your mind. In a world that flattens experience into function and speed, this care becomes a form of resistance, a refusal to disappear emotionally, a way of saying, I am more than what I produce. So if you feel tired without reason, disconnected without cause, or empty despite having everything in place, pause before blaming yourself. Look around. Notice the spaces you move through every day. Ask whether they support your humanity or quietly erode it. And then, in whatever way you can, begin to choose differently. Even small acts of beauty can restore something essential. Not all at once, not perfectly, but enough to remind the mind that it still belongs somewhere.